Hello friends and welcome back to the Dork Side. I'm the Dork in the Road, and today I want to talk to you about 8 things I learned on my first Backcountry Discovery Route adventure. I'm the Dork in the Road, and I want to be your internet riding buddy, so please consider subscribing. It's been about a month now since we finished the Washington BDR. Started with 6 guys, finished with 2, and there's a full series of those videos. If you want to check them out, I will link that playlist for you. I hope you'll take a look at it. But I wanted to just take some time and kind of reflect and share about what I learned on that trip and kind of what I wish I'd known before I started on that trip. So I've come up with the 8 things that I learned on this trip that will hopefully be helpful to you if you're planning your own BDR trip, be it the Washington BDR or California, Nevada, Mid-Atlantic, wherever. If you're getting ready to go out there and camp and ride, or just ride and stay in hotels or whatever on your first BDR, there's a few things that might be useful to you. So that's enough talking, let's just jump right in. First thing I learned on my first BDR was talk to the locals. A great example of this is we were in Okanagan looking for a place to eat breakfast, and Charles, our pocket extrovert, the most extroverted guy in the whole group, we just started asking locals where was a good place to eat, and we ended up in this restaurant called the Stockyard Cafe, which is a total hole in the wall that I never would have found or even realized there was a restaurant in there. The food was pretty good, so talking to the locals, you can find out things like that. We talked to some overlanders we met at a gas station, and they gave us a heads up about sections 2 and 3 and how difficult they were. I talked to the bartender at the Wood Chip in Nile, Washington, and he gave us some advice about finding campsites up on Bethel Ridge. After Mike broke his leg, we talked to the police officer about finding a hotel in Chelan, and he basically told us that it was going to be impossible and be way expensive because Chelan is a resort town, and lo and behold, we could not find a hotel room and ended up camping. And also, right before we tackled section 2, Baby Head Hill, I was on the fence about whether or not we were going to do it, and we just ended up talking to a guy at the gas station that we were at in Ellensburg. Basically, his advice was, that's not really worth it, especially if you're not sure, and so we didn't. Talking to locals along the way is a great way to get information and find things that you otherwise wouldn't, and it's just a fun part of the experience. So that's the first thing I learned. The second thing I learned is there's a lot of stuff you can get along the way. I carried a lot of extra gear. You have to stop for gas anyway, and so when you stop for gas, you can usually find food, you can usually find water, and so you don't have to carry a ton of that stuff with you necessarily. Obviously have an emergency ration or whatever to get you through the night if you end up having to camp unexpectedly, and you should always carry water with you, but you do not need to plan to bring food for the whole trip. You can always pop into a Walmart or a gas station or something and get some food, because like I said, you have to go to town to fill up your motorcycle anyway. You might as well fill up yourself as well. Which leads me to number 3, which is I had too much stuff. So I had no real plan for cooking on this trip, so I kind of brought everything I thought I might need to cook anything that I thought I might want to cook. So I had a small wood stove, I had my jet boil, and I had my Sea to Summit entire cooking kit. I didn't have a plan for what I was going to eat, and so I ended up bringing basically 3 times as much cooking gear. Almost anything can be cooked on the jet boil. I probably didn't need all the extra stuff that I had. I had too much stuff, so really think about what's redundant in your kit before you go, especially if you're riding and camping, and pare it down, because I had 80 pounds of gear. I did a whole debrief if you want to check it out on all the gear I brought and what I would bring again and what I wouldn't. Check out that video. The next thing I learned on this trip, and it kind of goes hand in hand with I had too much stuff, is some luxuries are actually essentials. I'll give you 2 really good examples, and they both have to do with mosquitoes, but the bugs are really bad in some places. They were very bad up on Bethel Ridge, and I had a rechargeable Thermacell mosquito repeller with me. I didn't use it at all the first 3 nights. I don't think I even used it the 4th night, but that last night when we were up on Bethel Ridge and it was insanely buggy, I was so glad I had that thing. And to go along with that, I had a whole suit of clothes. So I had a jacket, a pair of pants, a neck gaiter, and a hat, all of which I sprayed down with permethrin, which is a mosquito repellent. Didn't need it any of the other nights, but that last night up on Bethel Ridge, I got to sit out and watch the sunset, and Tim had to go in his tent because he was getting eaten alive so badly. Those things, while they may seem like unnecessary or extra luxuries, they turned out to be essentials on this trip. The other luxury that I thought was actually an essential was that little table that I carry with me. People always give me crap about the table, but man, cooking, making coffee, it is so nice to not have to do that on the ground and bend over from your camp chair. I consider that table an essential and not a luxury, but some people would disagree with me, and that's fine. Another thing I learned on this trip was to take advantage of opportunities that arise. Perfect example was the first night we camped, there was actually a shower in the campground, so I took a shower. I knew that I was not going to get another chance to take one for a while, but on the 3rd night, we ended up camping at a campground that had a shower again. So not only did I just jump in and rinse off, but I also did laundry. I rinsed off a pair of socks, some underwear, a shirt, all that, just thoroughly scrubbed it and then hung it up, and it was all dry by morning. So I took advantage of that opportunity. I did not have to dig a hole and poop in the woods one time because I took advantage of opportunities at gas stations. Looked for things like hiking trailheads. They often have a vault toilet. You're never too far from one of those on a trip like this. Gas stations will sometimes let you just fill up your water bladder without having to buy bottled water. You can take those into, I don't know how many gas station bathrooms I filled up my hydration pack in. There's sometimes they have spigots outside, so take advantage of those things as you see them. Just keep your water topped up and all those supplies, but don't be afraid to look around and think outside the box about how useful something nearby could be on a trip like this, especially when you're, camping off the bike for a week or whatever. The next thing that I learned was be prepared for the worst, but know that you hopefully won't have to use that stuff. And a perfect example was, while I did not end up having to dig a cat hole the entire trip, I did have a trowel with me. I had toilet paper, I had baby wipes, I had everything I needed to make that happen in case I had to do that in the woods, but I didn't have to. I had backpacking meals with me in case we were ever not able to find food in town or the timing didn't work out and I needed to just eat dinner in the woods without any prep. I had a couple backpacking meals with me, so prepare for the worst as much as possible. And again, we're talking about taking extra stuff, but I don't think a couple extra meals and a roll of toilet paper is gonna break your setup. Be prepared for the worst, but know that you may not have to use that stuff. You don't have to plan on using that stuff necessarily because you have other opportunities. The seventh thing I learned on my first BDR trip was really a good tip for motorcycle camping in general, and that is keep your camp stuff separate. I had a Tillamook dry bag on top of my motorcycle, and I had two panniers, one on either side. In the Tillamook dry bag on top, I had my tent, my sleeping bag, my pillows, my camp shoes, and basically everything I needed to set up camp for the night. So that, for instance, when we were at Lake Chelan and I had to park the bike away from where I was setting up my tent, I just unclipped that bag, walked over, dumped it out, and set everything up on the ground. I didn't have to dig for anything, and I didn't have to unpack anything I didn't need to do that. And I did that every night, and then the next morning it was just as easy to pack it back up. I only had the one bag, so I put everything back in the one bag, clipped it on the bike, and away I went. If it's the end of a long day and you're tired and you just want to set up, the last thing you want to do is go digging through all your bags. So it's so nice to just have that stuff right on top, convenient and separate. That's what's important here, where I can just grab it and know that the house and the bedroom are set up and I'm ready to go with whatever else I choose to do that night. And the eighth and final thing I learned, and this is probably the biggest one for me that I will take forward on future BDR trips, was I do a lot of riding to camp. I'll do an overnighter, I'll do a 2-dayer, and the point is to get there and camp and enjoy camp, right? On the BDR, you are camping to ride. So your camp is your hotel room, it's the place that you sleep. It is not where you spend the majority of your time. Time in camp is very limited. So I had way too many sort of camp luxuries, camp comfortable factors, when really camp is just the place where you end up and sleep. Particularly if you're eating at restaurants or gas stations, there's no reason to stop riding before, I don't know, 6 or 7 o'clock, depending on what you're doing and how late it's gonna be light. You can crush more miles because all you have to do is set up, hang out, and go to sleep. It's not like other camping trips where you go there to camp. The point of the BDR is the riding, and the camping just facilitates that riding. Better to take just what you need to get through the night comfortably than it is to take everything you might possibly want. I take way too many just in case things, particularly for camping. Prioritize your tools and your riding stuff. Take the basics for camping and know that if you end up being uncomfortable, you're not gonna be uncomfortable for very long because you're just not in camp that long. Your time in camp is very limited and you're gonna spend a lot more time on the bike than you will in camp, and a lot of the riding is difficult. So prioritizing bringing less gear, lighter gear, even if it means being less comfortable in camp, is gonna make it easier for the majority of your trip, the vast majority of your trip, which is the riding, not the camping. Those are 8 things I learned on my first BDR trip, on my trip on the Washington BDR. Have you done a BDR? What did you learn from your trips? What are some tips you would pass on to people who are thinking about doing their first BDR? Leave those in the comments below. Also, I want to give a big shout out to Moto Camp Nerd, Rocky Mountain ATV, the companies that supported me on this trip, that provided me gear to make that happen. And if you want, you can use my links to Moto Camp Nerd and Rocky Mountain ATV. And when you do, to support the channel and make it possible for me to get out and have future adventures and support my family. Doesn't cost you any extra, so I would encourage you to check out those affiliate links. But for now, and as always, I just want to say thank you very much for watching, and please do not forget to be excellent to each other. Thank you.
Excellent!
The sun came out, it's in my eyes now. It's right there, see it? Stupid sun. Also, guess where I'm filming this? In my front yard. I love my new house.